Hello and welcome once again to Cable Sports. My name is Anthony Powell, and as always, I'm joined here by my co-host, Bill Schulman. The focus of our show is a little bit different today. As you know, we usually discuss a plethora, and I know you didn't know I had that large of a vocabulary, a plethora of sports topics. Today, we're going to be focusing on the world of bodybuilding and of athletic body training. And to do that, we have a former Mr. America and Mr. Universe, Majk Mencer, who is now an athletic trainer at Gold's Gym in Venice. And Mike has also written 3 books on bodybuilding. And along with Bill, Mike, I'd like to welcome you to the show.
Thank you, Anthony.
Okay, and I guess a logical point would be to start with, how did you first learn about bodybuilding, and how did you first know that this is what you wanted to devote a large portion of your life to?
Well, it's one of those proverbial, often heard stories in bodybuilding. I was at a drugstore with my mother in my hometown of Ephrata, Pennsylvania, and while she was off doing some shopping, I was looking over the magazines, and all of a sudden my attention was arrested by the sight of a muscle man. And I knew instantly, there was no lag time, this is what I was going to be, and it was a love affair, and I've been doing it ever since.
That's interesting.
I'll be darned. Let me ask you, Mike, what role do you think genetics plays in the sport of bodybuilding?
It's very important. It's hard to determine exactly how important, along with motivation and the discipline involved, of course. I would say it's right up there, a prime determinant for sure.
So you're saying that there are certain people who are born with certain body types or certain muscle lengths that they can't correct for?
Yeah, I think most sports tend to have certain body types that excel more than other body types. For instance, in basketball, you're either born with the genetics to become 7 feet tall or you're not. In bodybuilding, the indices aren't quite as evident, but things like you mentioned, muscle belly length, bone size, and then one that's not so tangible is an inherited predisposition towards building muscle mass, and that's something you can't determine until you actually begin training. Some people, when they start training, grow almost immediately. Then there are other people who train for years and years, as you've probably seen in various gyms, who never grow at all.
Something that I was curious about, because, you know, there's so many different theories about training, and I hear people say, well, you can eat anything you want as long as you're working out constantly, and I've never held that to be true. How important is diet when one is training? Is there a percentage where you should devote to exercise versus diet? Or
no, I think they're both 100% important. Years ago, there was a saying that diet is 80% of bodybuilding, but I don't think you can quantify it that way. You've got to train properly and you've got to eat properly. I think diet is important because one of the first requisites in being a great athlete is that you're healthy, and you've got to eat a well-balanced diet to be healthy. But I don't think it's any more important than that. Many athletes tend to overemphasize certain elements of diet like vitamins and protein, and again, the most important requirement is that you eat a well-balanced diet just so that you're healthy.
kind of a follow-up on that, is there a percentage that you should devote in your diet to, let's say, carbohydrates, to protein, to fat?
Well, if you were to listen to the hucksters of the nutritional products, you would believe that your diet should be made up entirely of protein. But if you listen to qualified nutritional scientists, you'll hear most often that your diet should be 65% carbohydrates, 25% protein, and 15% fats. That's true for athletes and the average individual alike.
I know a lot of people, it seems like the bodybuilding era is starting to pick up more in the last, say, 10 or 15 years.
Yeah, I think so.
And a lot of these athletes, men and women, come from different sports. Do you consider bodybuilders to be athletes, or would you consider the sport more of a discipline?
Well, I think all sports involve discipline. It depends upon how you define sport. The fact that you have all these men around the world engaged in serious physical training, which will eventually culminate in the pursuit of a competitive goal, I think it's a sport.
Okay.
Talking about your career today as an athletic trainer, are you enjoying sharing your knowledge that you've obtained over the years and sharing it with other people and helping them build their bodies? Is it giving you a lot of personal satisfaction?
Yes, it is. I competed for, up to 10 years, and as you may know yourself, athletic training gets to be a little old as you get older yourself. But now I do enjoy sharing the knowledge that I acquired over the years of my own training with my clients, and it's very, very satisfying.
Mike, I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would like to improve their physiques and their bodies and would want to go to perhaps a trainer. But what should somebody look at when they are looking into getting a trainer? What are some of the qualifications maybe?
Well, not necessarily his muscular development or even his athletic appearance. It's actually very difficult. Presumably the person's going to the gym because he knows little or nothing about training. I think the only way to do it would be to assess his general intelligence level and listen as to how well he explains the principles of productive exercise, as to whether or not he has a grasp of the principles of exercise.
A couple things that I've run across, and while I've been training, is that people generally want either two types of ways to improve their body. They either want to get more muscle mass, or they want to become defined. Talk about a little bit about the different theories between gaining mass, what you should do, and maybe if somebody just wants to remain lean and not really gain any mass.
Good point. As a matter of fact, there are two types of basic training. You can train either for muscle mass or endurance, which tends to burn body fat and keep you lean. For those who want to build muscle mass, the most important principle is that of intensity. The harder you train, the more weight you lift, the more you put into it, the more muscle you'll develop. And those who are looking to just remain lean and not develop muscle, perhaps tone themselves, the intensity factor, the amount of weight they lift is not so important. They don't have to push themselves quite as hard.
Let me ask you, Mike, there's been a lot of talk for years and years and years, and not only in bodybuilding, but several sports, about the use of steroids.
Right.
How prevalent are they today compared to when you were competing?
Well, I think generally there's a movement away from steroid use since the increased media attention towards the deleterious effects of steroids. But in those who are still competing, I think there's an even greater use and abuse of steroids. For those who are hell-bent on competing, there's definitely more steroid use. And even beyond steroids now, they're taking what's called growth hormone, which is not a steroid compound in itself, but does affect the body's rate of growth enormously, from what I hear.
As far as giving you more size and bulk?
More muscle mass.
Okay. Do you feel they are necessary to compete on an international level with Mr. Olympia, the Lee Haneys of the world?
Without a doubt.
Not saying that Lee Haney does it, because I don't know if he does or does not, but I'm saying on that level.
Yeah, if you want to compete on even the local, national, international, or professional level, without a doubt, steroids are a part of it.
Are you saying it's pretty much necessary if you're going to be at the top of the heap in bodybuilding to pretty much use steroids only because everyone else is doing it?
Yeah.
Because that's the theory that you hear in other sports. Let's say in professional football, I was reading an article one time, and one lineman said that I take steroids only because I need to do it to compete because everyone else is doing it. And if I don't, I'm going to be thrown around.
I think there's more to it than that. It's true on that level. You have to take steroids to compete. But I think also the public has become accustomed now to seeing a certain level of development. And without steroids, the standard would go backwards and the public would lose interest. And the guys like it too. It's not just because they want to compete on a certain level. There are many bodybuilders in the gyms who don't compete and still take steroids because they want a certain look. Mm-hmm. That's not to say all of them do, but quite a few.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. Where do you see the sport going from here, since the guys have already attained this size and mass and leanness? Can you get any leaner and any bigger?
No, I don't think so. There isn't much being done in the way of research towards increased training or improved training methods. Or improved nutritional or dietary regimens. And in part because of the public outcry against steroid use, I don't think there's a whole lot of research being done in the area of steroids either. I don't think you're going to see much improvement in the standard over the next few years in bodybuilding.
I think that one thing that needs to be touched on, though, is that I don't think people should get the idea that they can just take steroids and they're going to develop into these Greek gods. I mean, you've still got to train and diet intensely.
And it should be stated to the general public that there is a definite health risk. I've been involved in bodybuilding for almost 30 years, and I've never met anyone, but that's not to say that there aren't those who haven't had health problems. I'm sure there are those guys out there who are taking many times the recommended daily dosage and are having problems. It just stands to reason that there's going to be somebody out there who does that. Mm-hmm. But it should be borne out, too, that there is a health risk, and there's also a legal risk involved now also. It's illegal to take steroids. Doctors can still prescribe them, but now the prescriptions require a triplicate. The government controls it, so it's much harder to obtain, and those who do take them are running a legal risk as well as a health risk.
Well, there's such an overall drug awareness in our country today that, that's certainly added to the awareness of steroids in sports. So all those things, working together make it kind of a dangerous thing to do.
You mentioned also along the same lines with I guess, growth hormone for the layman, including myself, would that give you size? And what effect would a steroid give you? Is it more energy, or what's the purpose?
No, steroids are growth hormone.
The difference between the two, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Well, I can't speak from personal experience. When I was competing years ago, I did take steroids. I never took growth hormone. From what I understand, the reaction is a little bit different with the growth hormone. It operates on different bodily systems, and the results are not quite as evident initially as with steroids. As soon as they start taking steroids, there's a response. Growth hormone, it takes time.
I'm curious, when you were competing, did you ever, because a lot of people don't like the appearance of bodybuilders, they think it's kind of grotesque. Did you, was that hard for you to deal with, people saying to you, you look hard, you're too big, you're too...
No. As a matter of fact, I was always a bit of a rebel throughout my life, and the thought that I would be different from other people never bothered me. And when I heard that it bothered other people, it even gave me more impetus to continue training.
That's a good philosophy. I'm sure a lot of their negative comments come from jealousy, because
I think so too.
The dedication that it requires to look, when you're competing is just tremendous.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I've talked to many people in the past who claimed initially they didn't like the look of a bodybuilder. Then I would bring them to a physique contest and show them the magazine. Over a period of time, their standards changed. They didn't feel as threatened.
We've got a picture of Mike on the monitor here also.
Look at that picture.
Excuse me, Mike.
That was taken a few years ago, I must say.
But you can see the dedication that would take to look like that. I mean, that's hours and hours and hours of training there.
How many years was that to get to that point?
Well, that was 11 years ago. A photograph taken right before the 1980 Mr. Olympia contest, and I had been training at that point for about 15 years, off and on, but for about 7 years straight through right before that.
That's incredible.
But an important point, Anthony, I did not train for hours and hours every day, and this is an important issue.
Oh, okay.
Contrary to what most bodybuilders do, which is train 2 to 4 hours a day, 7 days a week, to obtain that condition, I trained literally for 30 minutes 4 times a week, 2 hours a week.
Yeah, because the theory that you always hear is that it does require hours and hours to look like that.
The mistaken premise there is that more is better.
Uh-huh.
And the body doesn't necessarily work that way. If 2 hours or 4 hours a day were good, well, why not train 12 hours a day? Training is a form of stress, and up to a certain point in time, exposing the body to stress can be beneficial. But beyond a definite period in time, it can actually be detrimental.
That's interesting.
Let me ask you, amongst the top contenders in the world, or competitors, would everybody be training differently? Do you think, or do people know that less is actually better for them?
No, they don't. The vast majority of people who train it almost exactly the same way, for 2 to 4 hours a day, 6 to 7 days a week. There are those who have read my articles and have attended my seminars and tend to be reasonable individuals and train just for 30 to 45 minutes a day, 4 times a week.
Something that I'm always curious about, because I'm a big fan of doing cardiovascular work. Do you advocate that, doing, let's say, an hour of cardiovascular work a day? Does that keep the weight off, or does that tear down?
No, it does not necessarily keep the weight off. Weight control is primarily a matter of calorie balancing. You could do 2 hours a day of aerobics, and if you're eating too many calories, still be getting fat. Another point here that's important is that your weight training can give you the cardiovascular benefit at the same time that it gives you the muscle training benefit. If you're not resting too long between sets and you're sustaining what's called the age-adjusted pulse rate, you will develop a cardiovascular training effect and improve your heart and lungs along with your skeletal muscle tissue.
Give us a sample diet of someone that wanted to lose weight. How many calories? I guess it really depends on the individual person. You can't make an overall call on that. But
there is a fundamental principle involved here, and that is, as long as the individual goes below his or her maintenance level of calories, they will lose fat. Whether their maintenance level is 1,500 calories a day or 15,000, any number below that will cause the body to revert to fat burning instead of storing fat.
Is alcohol as fattening as everyone says it is?
Well, alcohol contains 7 calories a gram. Carbohydrates and protein contain 4 calories a gram, while fat contains 9 calories a gram, so it's in between.
No more beer, Bill?
I guess so.
No, as a matter of fact, I truly believe that you can indulge in those things on occasion without any harmful effects. As long as you're taking care of yourself, training 2 or 3 times a week, and basically following a well-balanced diet. There's always room for a few calories of beer. A few, I said.
Under your theory, I guess, of training, would that apply to men and women?
Yeah, the basic physiological principles involved in exercise physiology apply to everybody, male and female.
But it is true that men gain weight in areas that women don't gain weight.
Well, you know, I used to think that too, and I think there is a little bit of unobjective sexism there. I've seen a lot of women training now in the gym who gain even faster than some guys. Again, even with the women, it's individual genetic potential that determines how fast they'll grow. Some guys have almost no genetic potential for growth. Same is true for females, but then again, there's some females who exhibit a tremendous potential for growth.
Well, it's kind of hard to know, though, if you do have genetic. I mean, you could. I guess you should get a signal if you've been training for 10 years. You don't see any growth.
It's something you can only accurately assess in retrospect. You won't know until you try.
Right.
So for those who are interested, try it. Don't be put off by someone telling you, well, you don't have the potential. That's something no one knows, again, unless you're looking back over a period of time. Within 2 or 3 years, if you haven't gained anything at all, either you're training improperly, which is often the case, or you have poor genetics. But then again, anybody can improve. You may not become a muscular marvel, but you can improve your muscular tone and lose fat.
Mm-hmm. And would also enhance a certain degree of confidence with that also.
For sure.
Let me ask you one last question about steroids, and we'll move from that subject. In reference to women, do you feel it's as prevalent in the women's side as it is in the men's side of competition?
Yeah, for sure. Again, among those who are competing, it's omniprevalent. They all take it. And without a doubt.
Can you mask it, as we've heard in the media?
Well, it's interesting. Over the past 2 years, the International Federation of Bodybuilders, along with the National Physique Committee, have been testing competitors. But it's obvious to those who are in the know, who have the eye for these things, that they're still taking it. So they have somehow found a way to mask the test results.
So it almost sounds like you're saying there's a certain look that derives from a person from taking these drugs.
Without a doubt, for sure.
Can you give us some examples of what that might look like?
Well, the muscle tends to have a more swelled, even at times bloated look, and the veins actually become almost grossly enlarged. One of the side effects of steroids is that it increases blood volume by up to 2 pints. So when you see a bodybuilder in a gym with what appears to be abnormally huge veins, they are in fact abnormally large.
You know, seeing some bodybuilders make it in the acting fields, example Arnold Schwarzenegger and Lou Ferrigno, do you think there's room for more bodybuilders to make it like Schwarzenegger? What do those guys have that others obviously haven't been able to show? What is it just?
Your question sort of presumes the notion that every bodybuilder wants to be a movie star.
That's true. That's true.
And I don't think that's necessarily true. 2 things Louis and Arnold had going were their enormous success in bodybuilding, which tended to carry over to the public at large. And they were extremely disciplined and highly motivated people. And I think what they did was reappropriate their energy and discipline to the area of acting. And as a result, they became successful there also.
You're absolutely right. I mean, there's obviously a desire on their part to
become actors,
to get into the movies. You're absolutely right on that. And I know you've done some commentating work for the networks in bodybuilding. Is there any of that in your future? And is bodybuilding going to be get more television exposure?
I don't think bodybuilding will get any more television exposure, and as a result, I'm not really interested in pursuing commentary as a career.
Why wouldn't it get more exposure? Just didn't get the ratings, or?
That's a good question. Over the last, actually up to about 6 or 7 years ago, it seemed to be getting increasing exposure. The last 2 or 3 years, however, the networks haven't carried nearly as many contests.
ESPN
has taken over.
Right.
Right.
Let me ask you also, is there a best age to start training, male or female?
Well, I don't think there's ever been any definitive studies done to say anything conclusive about that, but some people speculate that from 25 to 35 seem to be the best years.
Okay,
but that's the best years. Again, anyone can improve, even up to the age of 70, 80. As long as you're reasonably healthy, you can get to the gym, you're suffering from no physical ailments, anybody can improve.
I've got to ask you, Mike, about one body part in particular that I'm sure a lot of men out there watching will be interested in, is the stomach.
Right.
Now, how do you get a washboard stomach like we saw on that? I'm sure most guys with summer coming up would die for that kind of information.
Well, you definitely don't want to indulge in too much beer like we were talking about before.
Right.
But it's primarily a matter of nutritional control, calorie control. As long as you know what your maintenance level of calories is and you go any number below that, you will lose body fat. Of course, the further you go into a calorie deficit, the more fat you'll lose at a faster rate. And the secondary factor is, of course, physical training, building up the muscle tissue. But even if you are training and building the muscle tissue up and you have the fat, you're still going to appear fat.
Right. Now, talking about the fat, are foods like, let's say, mayonnaise and the cakes, are those the type of foods that will cover up the muscle?
No.
That's
a common misconception. Again, it's all calorie control. Even if you were eating below your required or maintenance level of calories every day, let's say you're eating 500 calories below your maintenance level, you could eat that. All those calories could be comprised literally of table sugar and mayonnaise, and you still lose fat. There is no really one single food or group of foods that could be called fattening. It's your overall calorie intake that determines how fat you'll be.
So I can still go on late night Pop-Tart rampages, is that what you're saying?
As long as they're under control.
It's nice to know.
Let me ask you, I know over the last, I think it's about 6 or 7 years in a row now, Lee Haney has won Mr. Olympia or Mr. Universe 7 years in a row. In your mind, and I know you hear that there is some kind of politics involved, can anybody beat him, first off?
Well, I think there are a number of people who can beat him. Actually, what it boils down to is who's going to be in shape that day. Very often, even the top competitors miss their peak by a little bit. It's true in baseball, true in football. If he misses his peak by 1%, the guy who was second place last year can sneak ahead of him. So Lee Haney is definitely beatable, without a doubt.
Could you give us a couple of names of who you think would be, say, 2 or 3 gentlemen who would have a good shot at it?
Well, there's one guy who stands on the horizon at the moment who I think is going to win next year, and that's Sean Ray. Last year he placed, I think it was 5th or 6th. Not really in the top running, but that was only his second Olympia, and along with that, he has all the physical requirements in superabundance for winning the Olympia. Besides that, Lee Haney's won 7 in a row, and people are getting a little sick of seeing him in there.
Is he maybe living on his reputation alone now more?
Yeah, there is that element. Because bodybuilding is a little bit subjective and is subject to political influence, I think so, yeah.
I know that, like we said, that you've written a couple books now. Is authoring any more books in the picture for you in the future, or are you pretty much content doing what you're doing with the training?
No, I'm very content training the people that I'm training. If I was offered a deal, I would do it, but I've done 3 in the past, and the money isn't all that great, and it's like having a homework lesson every night, which I never did like. So I don't think so.
In terms of the discipline, you mean
the discipline and the research, and
it's a very competitive industry, isn't it? The material that.
Well, along with that, I think the bodybuilding book market has been saturated. If you go into most bookstores now, you'll see at least 2 or 3 dozen bodybuilding books. I don't think there's really room for one more. If there is, maybe I'll do one.
In our final minute now, Bill, you got any more questions?
Sure. Mike, do you see yourself coming back again and training again?
Absolutely.
Just kidding.
Absolutely not.
What about one of the just a quick thing here? One of the theories you hear about people when you turn 50 or 60, everything falls to your knees, which I know is not true. But could you share something about that with a couple of examples?
Yeah, I think that's one of those misconceptions that's motivated in part by fear and jealousy and a lack of understanding about what bodybuilding really is. Right now, there are at least 2 or 3 competitors on the top professional scene who, believe it or not, are in their 60s and winning. About 6 weeks ago, a man named Albert Beckles, at the age of 61, won the Niagara Falls Grand Prix bodybuilding professional contest, beating out guys who were in their 20s. He's been competing for 35 years, so where's his muscles turning to fat? They are not. He's getting better at the age of 61. Not 51, 61.
That's good to know.
And I would bet he'll be doing it at the age of 70.
Well, Mike, we're getting the signal now. We've got to wrap up. I want to thank you. Obviously, I was filled with a lot of misconceptions about training, and you've enlightened me.
Thank you, Anthony.
It's been very interesting.
My pleasure.
So until the next time, I'm Anthony Powell.
And I'm Bill Shulman, and thank you for watching.